Please subscribe, like and share this content. It means a lot to us. Thank you in advance.
To U.S. Code Chapter 5, Library of Congress. To U.S. Code Paragraph 149, Transfer of books to other libraries. The Librarian of Congress may from time to time transfer to other governmental libraries within the District of Columbia, including the Public Library, books and material in the possession of the Library of Congress in his judgment no longer necessary to its uses, but in the judgment of the custodians of such other collections likely to be useful to them, and may dispose of or destroy such material as has become useless, provided that no records of the federal government shall be transferred, disposed of, or destroyed under the authority granted in this section. To U.S. Code Paragraph 149A, permitting use of proceeds from disposition of surplus or obsolete personal property. A. Disposition of property within the limits of available appropriations. The Librarian of Congress may dispose of surplus or obsolete personal property of the Library of Congress by interagency transfer, donation, sale, trade-in, or other appropriate method. B. Use of proceeds. Any amounts received by the Librarian of Congress from the disposition of property under subsection A shall be credited to the funds available for the operations of the Library of Congress, and shall be available to acquire the same or similar property during the fiscal year in which the amounts are received and the following fiscal year. C. Effective date. This section shall apply with respect to fiscal year 2012 and each succeeding fiscal year. To U.S. Code Paragraph 150, Sale of copies of card indexes and other publications. The Librarian of Congress is authorized to furnish to such institutions or individuals as may desire to buy them, such copies of the card indexes and other publications of the library as may not be required for its ordinary transactions, and charge for the same a price which will cover their cost and 10% added, and all monies received by him shall be deposited in the Treasury and shall be credited to the appropriation for necessary expenses for the preparation and distribution of catalog cards and other publications of the library. To U.S. Code Paragraph 151, Smithsonian Library. The library collected by the Smithsonian Institution under the provisions of the Act of August 10, 1846, Chapter 25, and removed from the building of that institution, with the consent of the regents thereof, to the Library of Congress, shall, while there deposited, be subject to the same regulations as the Library of Congress, except as hereinafter provided. To U.S. Code Paragraph 152, Care and use of Smithsonian Library. The Smithsonian Institution shall have the use of the library referred to in Section 151 of this title in like manner as before its removal. All the books, maps, and charts of the Smithsonian Library shall be properly cared for and preserved in like manner as are those of the Congressional Library, from which the Smithsonian Library shall not be removed except on reimbursement by the Smithsonian Institution to the Treasury of the United States of expenses incurred in binding and in taking care of the same, or upon such terms and conditions as shall be mutually agreed upon by Congress and the regents of the institution. To U.S. Code Paragraph 153, Control of Library of House of Representatives. The Library of the House of Representatives shall be under the control and direction of the Librarian of Congress, who shall provide all needful books of reference therefor. The Librarian, 2 assistant librarians, and assistant in the library, shall be appointed by the Clerk of the House, with the approval of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. No removals shall be made from the said positions except for cause reported to and approved by the Committee on Rules. To U.S. Code Paragraph 154, Library of Congress Trust Fund Board, Members, Quorum, Seal, Rules and Regulations. A board is created and established, to be known as the Library of Congress Trust Fund Board, hereinafter referred to as the Board, which shall consist of the Secretary of the Treasury, or an Assistant Secretary designated in writing by the Secretary of the Treasury, the Chairman and the Vice Chair of the Joint Committee on the Library, the Librarian of Congress, 2 persons appointed by the President for a term of 5 years each, the first appointments being for 3 and 5 years, respectively, 4 persons appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, in consultation with the Minority Leader of the House of Representatives, for a term of 5 years each, the first appointments being for 2, 3, 4, and 5 years, respectively, and 4 persons appointed by the Majority Leader of the Senate, in consultation with the Minority Leader of the Senate, for a term of 5 years each, the first appointments being for 2, 3, 4, and 5 years, respectively, Upon request of the chair of the board, any member whose term has expired may continue to serve on the trust fund board until the earlier of the date on which such member's successor is appointed or the expiration of the one-year period which begins on the date such member's term expires. 7 members of the board shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business, and the board shall have an official seal, which shall be judicially noticed. The board may adopt rules and regulations in regard to its procedure and the conduct of its business. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 155, Compensation and Expenses of Library of Congress Trust Fund Board. No compensation shall be paid to the members of the board for their services as such members, but they shall be reimbursed for the expenses necessarily incurred by them, out of the income from the fund or funds in connection with which such expenses are incurred. The voucher of the chairman of the board shall be sufficient evidence that the expenses are properly allowable. Any expenses of the board, including the cost of its seal, not properly chargeable to the income of any trust fund held by it, shall be estimated for in the annual estimates of the librarian for the maintenance of the Library of Congress. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 156, Gifts, etc., to Library of Congress Trust Fund Board. The board is authorized to accept, receive, hold, and administer such gifts, bequests, or devises of property for the benefit of, or in connection with, the library, its collections, or its service, as may be approved by the board and by the Joint Committee on the Library. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 157, Funds of Library of Congress Trust Fund Board, Management of. The monies or securities composing the trust funds given or bequeathed to the board shall be receipted for by the Secretary of the Treasury, who shall invest, reinvest, or retain investments as the board may from time to time determine. The income as and when collected shall be deposited with the Treasurer of the United States, who shall enter it in a special account to the credit of the Library of Congress and subject to disbursement by the librarian for the purposes in each case specified, and the Treasurer of the United States is authorized to honor the requisitions of the librarian made in such manner and in accordance with such regulations as the Treasurer may from time to time prescribe, provided, however, that the board is not authorized to engage in any business nor to exercise any voting privilege which may be incidental to securities in its hands, nor shall the board make any investments that could not lawfully be made by a trust company in the District of Columbia, except that it may make any investments directly authorized by the instrument of gift, and may retain any investments accepted by it. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 158, Deposits by Library of Congress Trust Fund Board with Treasurer of United States. In the absence of any specification to the contrary, the board may deposit the principal sum, in cash, with the Treasurer of the United States as a permanent loan to the United States Treasury, and the Treasurer shall thereafter credit such deposit with interest at a rate which is the higher of the rate of 4% per annum or rate which is 0.25 percentage points less than a rate determined by the Secretary of the Treasury, taking into consideration the current average market yield on outstanding long-term marketable obligations of the United States, adjusted to the nearest 1/8 of 1%, payable semi-annually, such interest, as income, being subject to disbursement by the Librarian of Congress for the purposes specified, provided, however, that the total of such principal sums at any time so held by the Treasurer under this authorization shall not exceed the sum of $10 million. 2 U.S. Code Paragraph 158A, Temporary Possession of Gifts of Money or Securities to Library of Congress, Investment. In the case of a gift of money or securities offered to the Library of Congress, if, because of conditions attached by the donor or similar considerations, expedited action is necessary, the Librarian of Congress may take temporary possession of the gift, subject to approval under Section 156 of this title. The gift shall be received for and invested, reinvested, or retained as provided in Section 157 of this title, except that 1. A gift of securities may not be invested or reinvested, and 2. Any investment or reinvestment of a gift of money shall be made in an interest-bearing obligation of the United States or an obligation guaranteed as to principal and interest by the United States. If a gift is not so approved within the 12-month period after the librarian so takes possession, the principal of the gift shall be returned to the donor and any income earned during that period shall be available for use with respect to the Library of Congress as provided by law.